Welcome back, viewers. You are with me, Surbhi Unyal, and I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. Friends, we have been doing a special lecture series on the introduction to philosophy. And in this series, we have been discussing various schools from the Indian tradition. In the last lecture, we discussed Vedanta philosophy and some of its important discussions related to its origin and its development. Following upon that, in this lecture, we will discuss various other schools, what are the various schools in the Vedanta philosophy, and then specifically talking about Advaita Vedanta. So, as discussed earlier in our last lecture, that Vedanta philosophy is a vast and a rich body of literature which has extensive commentaries, it has sub-commentaries and various other works that have been done by the scholars from the different schools of thought. And these scholars of each Vedanta school engaged in writing to expound their interpretation of the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras and the other foundational texts. Now, the fundamental question basically about the nature of the relationship between the Jeev or the self and the God or the Brahman has led to the classification of Vedanta into different schools, each offering its perspective on this crucial issue. So, you will see that these different schools from the Vedanta philosophy are basically trying to address this fundamental question, which is that what is the nature of the relationship between the individual self or the Jeev and the Brahman, which is the ultimate. Some might even relate or use it as God, but we will see that how different schools take up this issue. And this is considered to be the fundamental question on which these different schools have been classified depending on how they see this relationship and how they interpret this relationship. So, the first being Advaita Vedanta, which is non-dualism, associated prominently with Adi Shankaracharya. Advaita Vedanta asserts the absolute identity between the individual self, the Jeev, and the ultimate reality, which is Brahman. According to Advaita, the apparent diversity in the world is an illusion, which is Maya. And realizing the non-dual nature of reality is the key to liberation or moksha. So, Advaita Vedanta, which is also considered as non-dualism, so it's rejecting the idea of dualism, it's non-dualism. So, in this philosophy, which has been specifically associated with Adi Shankaracharya, it asserts that there is an absolute identity between the individual self and the ultimate reality or the ultimate Brahman. And they considered that the diversities that are present in the world can be regarded as Maya, or it is considered as an illusion. And the ultimate aim through which we will get liberation or the moksha is realizing the non-dual nature of the reality. That there isn't any difference between the individual self and the ultimate. So, once we realize that there isn't this distinction between the individual Jeev and the Brahman, that is the key to liberation or moksha. Then comes Vishisht Advaita Vedanta, which is referred to as qualified non-dualism. This is associated with Ramanujan. So, Vishisht Advaita Vedanta proposes a qualified non-dualism. It maintains that while the individual self, the Jeev, and the Brahman are fundamentally identical, there exists a qualified distinction, which is Vishesh, between them. And this school emphasizes the concept of surrender and loving devotion to God as a means of spiritual realization. This is the Vishisht Advaita, or the qualified non-dualism given by Ramanujancharya. And this school, you can see its emphasis is basically on the devotion to God as a means of spiritual realization or liberation. Then is Dvait Vedanta, which is dualism, founded by Madhav. Dvait Vedanta posits a strict duality between individual self, Jeev, and the Brahman, the ultimate reality. According to this school, the self and the God, or you can say the ultimate, are eternally distinct entities, and their relationship is characterized by a dualistic understanding. And Madhav emphasized devotion to God as a means of attaining salvation or liberation. So this school basically, it argues that there is a strict duality, that these two are absolutely different. And that's why they hold this kind of dualism between the individual self and the ultimate Brahman, and focusing upon or emphasizing on the dualistic understanding. Then is Bhed Abhed, which means difference and non-difference, represents a nuanced approach to the relationship between individual self, the Jivatman, and the ultimate reality, which is Brahman. This tradition acknowledges both the distinctiveness and the inherent connection between the individual and the divine. It is Nimbark who credited with founding the Dvait Advait school within the Bhed Abhed tradition. And he emphasized the simultaneous difference and non-difference. So difference and non-difference together between the individual self and the ultimate Brahman. Then is Shuddha Advait, the philosophy of pure non-dualism propounded by Vallabhacharya. The Shuddha Advait represents a unique perspective within the Vedanta tradition, emphasizing the absolute non-dual nature of reality. So these were the different schools based on how they have seen the relationship between the individual and the ultimate, and through the interpretations that they have of this relationship between the Jeev and the Brahman, that shows the diverse or the diversity within the Vedanta philosophy, and that's how the different schools within the Vedanta philosophy has developed. Now let us focus particularly on Advait Vedanta. So Advait Vedanta is a major philosophical school with the broader, you can say broader Vedantic tradition, and it is one of the most influential schools of thought in Hindu philosophy. Advait means non-dual, emphasizing the ultimate oneness or non-duality of the self, the Atman, and the ultimate reality, which is Brahman. So this, amongst all the other schools of Vedanta, is considered to be one of the major schools or major philosophical schools within the Vedanta tradition as well. And as mentioned earlier, that Advait comes from the word Advait, so non-dualism that it is talking about, And this non-duality is between the self, the Atman, and the ultimate reality, which is the Brahman. So in the 7th century, Gaudapad, known for his work Mandukya Karika, a commentary on Mandukya Upanishad, dwelled into the concept of non-duality, Advait, rejecting the existence of duality even in the states of wakefulness or dreams. So Gaudapad posited that the mind traverses through the illusions of Maya, and the ultimate truth is the realization of the non-duality. So it is in the 7th century that Gaudapad, in his work, which is Mandukya Karika, basically a commentary on Mandukya Upanishad, that is where he has mentioned about this concept of non-duality or Advait, where he is rejecting the existence of duality even in the wakefulness or even in the dream state. So there isn't any duality that exists, be you in a wakeful state or in dream, that he has mentioned in his Mandukya Karika. So the difficulty in discerning this truth is attributed to ignorance or illusion, challenging the idea of inherent existence or origination of things. So Gaudapad, he advocated for the concept of Atman or Atma as the all souls, negating the notion of an individual soul, likening it to a temporarily delineated entity similar to the space within a jar that merges with the vast space once the jar is broken. So in that ways he has described the concept of Atman as all souls and negating the notion of individual soul. So Adi Shankaracharya, building upon Gaudapad's foundational ideas, strengthened the philosophy of Advait Vedanta. His major commentaries focused on the Brahma Sutras, Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita. In his philosophical exposition, Shankar departed from empirical analysis and directly approached the absolute Brahman. So his metaphysical stance was grounded in the idea that the real is that which cannot be negated. To support this argument that the Upanishads reveal the nature of the Brahman, Shankar developed a comprehensive epistemology explaining human errors in perceiving the world as real. And therefore he asserted that Brahman, it transcends time, it transcends space and causality, which he regarded as forms of empirical experiences, and posited that no distinction within Brahman or from Brahman is conceivable. So the distinction cannot be made within the Brahman or from Brahman, that it can be conceived. So Shankar's conception of the ultimate reality, it centers around Atman or Brahman, characterized by pure consciousness, which is Gyan Swarup, or the consciousness of the pure self, which is Swarup Gyan. This reality is devoid of all attributes. It is Nirgun, and it transcends all categories of the intellect, Nirvishesh. So this reality that we are talking about in according to Shankar, it is devoid of all attributes and therefore it is considered to be nirgun. And it also transcends all the categories of the intellect as well. So when the Brahman is associated with its inherent potency, Maya or Mula Vidya, it manifests as a qualified Brahman, or you can say Sagun or Savishesh or Apar Brahma, or the Lord or the Ishwar. So in this aspect, Brahman takes on the roles of creator, the preserver and the destroyer, orchestrating the existence of the world, which is considered his divine manifestation. Fine. So when Brahman is associated with its inherent potency, Maya or Mula Vidya, it manifests as a qualified Brahman or the Ishwar. And in this aspect then, Brahman, it takes the role of the creator, it takes the role of a preserver and a destroyer, and trying to understand the existence of the world. So which is basically considered as his divine manifestation. Then the individual self, which is known as Jeev, can be understood as a complex interplay of subject and object. Subject element of Jeev is pure consciousness, referred to as the Sakshin. Its object element is the internal organ called the Antahakarana, which is bhautik in nature as it comprises 5 elements with Tejas predominating, making it perpetually active except during sleep or states like swoon or trance. So that's how you can see that how Shankar has defined individual self. This individual self can be considered as a subject as well as an object. As a subject element, Jeev is considered to be pure consciousness and referred to as Sakshin. As object element, it is the internal organ called the Antahakarana, and this Antahakarana, it is bhautik because it comprises of 5 elements, and within that it is the Tejas which is predominant, and since it is predominant, it makes it active. The origin of the internal organ lies in avidya, giving rise to individuality. So in the process of perception, the internal organ, upon the contact with a sense organ and an object, takes the form of that object. And this phenomena where the internal organ comes into the contact with the help of sense organs with that of the object, this whole process or the phenomena is known as vritti, or the mode of internal organ. And this is where you can say the origin of internal organ lies in avidya, and this gives rise to individuality. So this vritti then, it is guided by the sakshin, which is the pure consciousness, and it assumes the shape of the empirical knowledge. In the waking state, the internal organ, it collaborates with the senses. During the dream state, it operates independently, and in deep sleep, it merges into its causal factors or avidya. Even in this state, individuality persists due to the association of the sakshin with the avidya. So even in this state where this whole process is taking place, the individuality still remains. Why? Because there is this association of the sakshin with the avidya. And liberation occurs when Gyan or knowledge, it destroys avidya. And the Sakshan is realized as the eternal Brahman, a truth it inherently embodies. So that's the whole process of how Jeev and how there are avidya, and then ultimately how the liberation can be attained with the right knowledge, which destroys avidya and makes the Sakshan realize the eternal Brahman, a truth it already has but it is not able to realize. So with the help of right knowledge, a person is able to realize that eternal Brahman which was already inherent in him. So let us now discuss what is Brahman and Atman. Brahman is considered as the supreme, all-pervading spirit and the soul of the universe, the divine essence and the source of all beings, from which all created things emanate and to which they return. So Brahman as a supreme spirit is not an object of worship in the usual sense of the term, but Brahman is meditated upon by the devotee with the profound veneration. So Brahman is considered to be the supreme, to be the ultimate. It is all-pervading spirit. And it is considered to be the soul of the universe. It is considered the divine essence and also the source of all beings, from which all things have been created and to which everything will return. So the Brahman as the supreme spirit, we need to be clear that it is not something to be worshipped. It's not something, because when we worship, then there is a duality that exists. So we are worshipping something else. But it's not something, that has to be worshipped. It is something that has to be meditated upon and that has to be realized by the person. And that happens only with the right knowledge. So with the right knowledge, Brahman can be meditated upon by the person, and that's how one realizes the ultimate or the supreme. So Brahman was the center theme in Upanishad, Gyan Kand, and Chandogya Upanishad, Tattvamasi, which is that thou art. Jeev is identified with Brahman. Brahman and the self are the one and the same. According to Advait, there is no duality. One and many, infinite and finite, the subject and the object, etc., are the limitations of consciousness that cannot comprehend the Brahman due to ignorance or avidya. There is no language to describe Brahman, and it is like neti neti, because you cannot actually describe Brahman in a language. So it is considered to be as neti neti, not this, not that. Understanding Brahman is beyond the senses. He is the purest knowledge and illuminates like the source of light. So Brahman is self-existent. He is described as Sachid Anand, meaning Sat, infinite truth, Chit, infinite consciousness, and Anand, which is infinite bliss. And that's how Brahman is also known as Sachid Anand. Shankar sketches him as Satyam Jnanam Ananta Brahman. So Brahman is the truth, knowledge and endless. Brahman is free from any kind of differences or differentiations. Brahman is neither a Sajatya, homogeneous, because there is no second to him, nor Vijatya, which is because none other than him exists. And that's how Shankar defines Brahman. Advait philosophy is built on the strong hold of Upanishads and Brahma Sutras. Upanishads give various incidences where it is highlighted that Brahman is equal to Atman. So, Prajnanam Brahma, his consciousness is Brahman in the Upanishads. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman in the Bhadrayanaka Upanishad. And various other definitions of Brahman can be found in the Upanishads, which have been taken up in the Advait philosophy. Even in the Brahma Sutra, it is known as Athato Brahma Jigyasa, and this has been taken up by Shankar as well. So, taking these examples, Advait accepts that Brahman is the one, the whole and the only reality. Other than Brahman, everything else, including the universe, the material objects and the individual, they are false. And how can we actually realize it? We can realize it with the right knowledge. So, Gyan basically is the way through which we will be able to realize this ultimate. So, Brahman is infinite, omnipresent, it is omnipotent, incorporeal, impersonal, transcendent reality, that is the divine ground for all beings. There is no separation or distinction between Brahman and the others in the universe. That is how, when one achieves the Turiya state, one experiences that one's soul becomes one with everything else. So that's where we realize the ultimate and see that how we experience one's own soul becomes one with everything else. So with this, we will come to an end of this lecture today. We will continue our discussion on Advait Vedanta and various other schools of Vedanta philosophy in our upcoming lectures. So thank you for staying with us, and do watch our next lecture to follow up on Vedanta philosophy. Thank you, viewers.